Welcome to our monthly coach webinar for October 2020. I hope everyone is doing well, staying healthy, and having a great week. This morning, we are thrilled to have Coach Kerrie Hoffman with us with a presentation on the great pivot, how to keep up with the increasing speed of business. For those of you who may not be familiar with Kerrie, she is passionate about business transformation and getting as many companies as possible on their journey to the next age. Kerrie is a #1 best-selling business author and CEO of Hoffman Digital, an ecosystem of companies that ignite the human experience at work. She is a strategic advisor at several modern technology companies. She is co-founder and partner at Get Digital Velocity, and she is digital advisor and a certified business coach at Focal Point Business Coaching. In addition, Kerrie serves as a keynote speaker at various industry events and venues. Prior to her current role as a business coach and digital advisor, she has spent more than 30 years in 3 corporations as an or intrapreneur and business transformer. She worked in a variety of industries and several roles, including CIO, operations, supply chain, and sales for employers including Aurora Healthcare, Johnson & Johnson, and Johnson Controls. Before we begin the presentation, as always, just one administrative matter. We want this to be as educational and informational for all of you as possible. Please feel free to pose any questions that you might have using the chat feature, and we will direct them to Kerrie at the conclusion of her presentation. I know that Kerrie will also be asking you to participate, or this is more of an interactive presentation, so please feel free to participate when called upon to do so as well. Again, thank you all for attending this Align Coach webinar, and I will now turn the microphone over to Kerrie.
Thanks, Eugene. I'm really excited to be here today. For 2 decades now, we've been living in a time of transition and great transformation, with business continuing to accelerate. We all feel that, right? Many companies have been transforming, while others have not yet pivoted and gotten on their path to digital. So it's really more important now than ever to get clear on how to thrive in a digital world, to remain relevant, and continue to grow significantly. So I call it the Great Pivot because we have actually exited the industrial age and entered the next stage. So you're going to hear me call business from the industrial age traditional business and business in the next age digital business. Don't get hung up on the terminology. It's just a way to get all of us on the same page. All right, are you guys ready for this? I hope so, because you're going to feel the accelerating pace in this session. But don't worry, like Eugene said, it is being recorded. So here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to teach some concepts, which includes taking a journey through evolutionary transitions, exploring why adopting a digitally expanded mindset is necessary to remove mental models and obstacles. And you'll learn about the digital flow framework to accelerate learning on the differences between traditional business and digital business. Then I'm going to introduce some tools so that we can all take action. All right, so like Eugene said, I really want people to interact, so feel free to comment in chat. And there'll also be a couple of points throughout the presentation and at the end where you can ask questions. All right, so let's first explore evolutionary transition, because this gives some context to what's happening today. Everyone's familiar with these eras and ages and revolutions. I think what's interesting is every time that we move from one age to the next, there are 3 similar characteristics. First, there's always a trigger at the start of each age. Next, the way that work is conducted in each one of these is completely different. And third, there is a significant acceleration in business. All right, so as an example, the trigger which set off the agricultural age was stationary farming and primitive irrigation. This was a big change where people started to settle in villages and cities. They began selling a focused area of goods and services. Then they bought everything else that they needed from other sole proprietors. In the Industrial Revolution, we moved from small proprietors working with their hands to large organized departments working with machines. Automation of manual work with machines was the trigger. So these were things like the steam engine and the automated spinning machine to make textiles. That actually happened around the year 1760 in Europe. This is where corporations were eventually born. Another significant transformation, new ways of working, and significant acceleration in business. The next stage, in this next stage, we're actually in it now. We are fundamentally changing everything about the way we were used to working in the industrial age. The next stage was triggered by an exponential growth in technology. Around the year 2000, new companies like Salesforce, as an example, started popping up, and they were using the exponential technologies to build new, more efficient technology platforms. Now, of course, computers have been around more than 2 decades. We all know this. It's the very modern, newly architected exponential technology of the last 2 decades, which was the trigger. So now we're only 2 decades into this move to the next stage, and a major wrench gets thrown in with COVID-19. So let's look at the impact that that's had. Remember, the next stage started around the year 2000 with new technology companies starting to pop up. They were leveraging the trigger in exponential growth in technology. Now, many of these companies were digital natives, which means they specifically started the company as a digital company with much different ways of working. You can see these as depicted as the green dots. Let's see what you guys come up with in chat. Google, absolutely. Google is a great example. Thanks, Alfred. IBM, cheat. Now, IBM's interesting, right? Because they actually started in the industrial age, but they have reinvented themselves and they've been on to their path of digital the whole time, and they've actually been contributing to it. So that's a really cool example of a company that's gone digital. Dell's another one of those companies who started in the traditional and has really moved themselves into the next stage. And Amazon, another great example. Great, awesome, you guys. So 2007 is the year that exponential technology became mainstream. The digital natives started to accelerate significantly. This is also when some traditional companies from the industrial age started to adopt a digital way of doing business. And while some companies were transforming, other traditional companies were being disrupted by digital natives and disappeared altogether. So, who can name some companies that disappeared? Who's been disrupted? There's some pretty common examples out there. You guys can type those in chat. Blockbuster is a key one, right? Netflix disrupted Blockbuster. It's interesting. I was just hearing a Blockbuster story recently, and there is one Blockbuster store left. But for the most part, they've been disrupted. Kodak's another one. I love the Kodak example because people bring it up a lot, and it's absolutely true. But what's interesting about Kodak is they actually developed the technology for digital cameras, but then they couldn't bring it upon themselves to actually roll it out because it would completely cannibalize their film business. So they didn't do it. So it's very interesting that they ended up having their film business disrupted by it. Okay, great examples. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so then the pandemic hits, right? And it creates the most widespread global disruption in modern history. So, on the bright side, this disruption is actually fueling technology adoption. I've never seen so many companies all around the world pivoting so quickly to work remotely. And this, of course, was enabled by technology. But to thrive during this disruption, companies need to go way beyond working remotely. Although we've all really been shoved in to the next stage by the global pandemic, the companies pivoting the quickest are creating entirely new or highly modified services. Einstein with IBM is a great example of that. They're creating new products and supply chains, and they're often outpacing their traditional competitors. So the question is, are we keeping up with the exponential growth in technology? What do you guys think? Are we keeping up? Keeping up with the modern growth in technology? Not keeping up? Let's see what you guys think. No, Alfred says no, we're not keeping up. Yep, we got a couple of no's there. All right, so the answer is for the most part, no. I see Scott said partially. That's true as well, because some companies are keeping up with the exponential growth in technology for sure. This is a chart by Eric Teller that I found in the book Thank You for Being Late by the author Thomas Friedman. The chart shows that technology is already on the exponential part of its curve. However, human adaptability is not. In fact, it has fallen behind and caused a gap. It is more important than ever for companies to adopt the transformation that's needed to keep their businesses relevant, growing, and profitable. And I think in the current global situation, it's definitely a kick in the butt for companies to increase adoption, right? The silver lining is we're already seeing the human adaptability curve take a little bit of an upswing. But there's still a gap. And if you don't go beyond just working remotely, you'll still fall behind. So the ways to close the gap are on the left-hand side of this chart. And I'm going to walk through each one of these in a minute. But first, I just want to pause here. This is one of my pauses to see if you guys have any questions or comments or maybe ahas, things that were kind of news or a surprise to you. See if we have any questions. Okay, I think we're good on the question front. All right, so let's go to this first way to fill the gap, which is adopting a digitally expanded mindset. Adopting a digitally expanded mindset really is a prerequisite to removing the mental models and obstacles and fully step into the next stage. This new mindset can also help you bounce back from the current global situation if your business has not reached rapid growth and acceleration yet. So there are 5 aspects of a digitally expanded mindset, starting with a digitally expanded mindset sees the possibilities in the digital era. You must believe that digital is within reach as a prerequisite to taking any action. This should really permeate throughout your behaviors and attitudes. Then take the next bold step to create a vision for where you want to take your business in the next stage. An intriguing vision will engage a critical mass of believers in your organization. Let's look at aspect 2. A digitally expanded mindset believes in the power of modern technology. Digital businesses are enabled by modern technology. It's important to realize and admit the traditional technology that most of us started using in the last century and may still be using today needs to be retired, especially since it's not uncommon to still implement traditional technology today. There are companies still selling traditionally architected technology. So the question is, how do you know the difference? Well, modern technology can systematize, scale, and speed up every interaction in your business. Here's one of the keys to knowing it's modernly architected. It can be implemented in days and weeks. And it's so elegantly designed that it's intuitive to learn. Modern technology is also natively available on the web, the tablet, and the phone, really all at the same time. Moving on, aspect 3, digitally expanded mindset is anchored in an abundance mentality. So an abundance mentality is collaborative, it's open, it's trusting. When you have an abundance mentality, you believe there is more than enough for everyone, enough customers, enough revenue, enough talent. You even turn competitors into partner. Now, I know there's a lot of ambiguity when we're moving from a scarcity mentality, which is really what drove traditional business in the industrial age, and then moving to abundance. That creates a lot of ambiguity. Well, the fourth aspect of a digitally expanded mindset is a comfort with ambiguity. The current level of transformation is both exciting and often scary for our employees and talent pools. I mean, we're actually moving from the industrial age to the next stage, so ton of ambiguity. It's important to have a strong vision to keep your employees motivated and oriented in the direction that you want your business to move. Let's look at the last aspect of a digitally expanded mindset, which focuses on a growth outlook. So, having a growth outlook in the digital age means that you are an explorer, you have agility, you adjust to change, even thrive in diversity, and seek resources and answers. So, how does one do that? Well, believing that growth is well within reach is definitely a necessity. But becoming a continuous learner is super important, and doing that research to accelerate implementing your ideas. So, what are some ways that you can do research in today's world? There's some really easy ways to do it, right? How do you guys research something? If you have an idea or you're trying to figure something out, Google, right? Great, Scott. Scott, Steve, Google it. That's one of my favorite things to say. Just Google it. It is so easy to do research today by doing that. Okay, I mentioned adopting these 5 aspects of a digitally expanded mindset is a prerequisite to fully stepping into the next stage. So, how do we actually move into the digital flow framework? Well, I created a framework called the Digital Flow Framework to accelerate our learning on the differences between traditional business from the industrial age and digital business in the next stage. All right, so the Digital Flow Framework is based on a metaphor for speed. So we're going to take a slight tangent and explore this metaphor. So the metaphor for speed has 3 levels. The first level is based on ultra runner Kilian Jornet, who is the fastest person to climb Mount Everest. It took him 26 hours, which translates to roughly 0.5 miles per hour. The second level of speed is based on the weather phenomenon called the jet stream, which can go as fast as 250 miles per hour. So that's significantly faster than climbing Mount Everest. And the third level of speed is based on the solar winds, which fly off the sun at a speed of up to 1 million miles per hour. All right, so let's see how these 3 levels of speed actually fit into the digital flow framework. At speed level 1, the mountain climb, traditional business is anchored firmly on the ground, with changes in business models being reliant on traditional technology that can take quarters and years to implement. Traditional business has relatively static business models, and for several reasons. One, there is a lot of self induced complexity. 2, process is constrained by traditional technology, so it ends up being really hard to keep up with the pace of business. At speed level 2, digital business today is sitting in the jet stream with an ability to test and change business models in short periods of time and implement changes in products and services in weeks and even days when exponential technology is fully adapted. So you can see several technologies up here in the jet stream of business. I think many people think these technologies are cutting edge, but they're really not. These technologies are all mature enough to implement today. They've all been around for 2 decades, if not more. And businesses adopting these technologies can go 50 to 100 times or more faster than businesses still operating in a traditional manner. The higher the adoption, the higher the digital velocity and the less friction that you have operating your business. And up in the future of business are several exponential technologies that are in the development phase, being worked on by scientists, engineers, and makers. These technologies have the potential to change every aspect of the world as we know it. So if you feel like the pace of business today is fast, really start preparing for the substantially increased velocity in the future of business. At the same time, I always say don't fret, because adopting the new ways of working really allow businesses to work at this increasing pace in a comfortable and frictionless way. If you're not comfortable with the speed today, you likely have a ways to go. All right, so I covered a lot of information. Please feel free to put your questions in the question and answer panel. And I'll be sure to keep monitoring that and answer those questions. Now, remember, as we move from one age to the next, the way work is conducted is completely different. So let's look at the new ways of working in a digital business. First, it's necessary for companies to unlock and start practicing extreme customer centricity. This means that everyone in the company has a touch point with the customer, understands the customer's issues deeply, and can anticipate the customer's needs. A fully digital business can then respond quickly to solve issues, even if it means changing your products and services to do so. The customer and the company obtain a really high level of partnership, and the customer actually feels like they're part of the company. They feel like they can influence the company's products and services. To fully unlock extreme customer centricity requires the three keys to achieve digital velocity. So, the first key is around talent. There's an abundance of talent out there when alternate sources of talent are utilized. This can include things like crowdsourcing, freelancers, deep partnerships with suppliers, universities, even partnerships with customers and competitors. It's also important to augment your internal talent with things like artificial intelligence. I'm a big believer that AI is about making our lives easier, not replacing our jobs. It's also really important because you need to free up people's time to focus on the customer. Digital businesses next have agile and flexible operations. They're often organized primarily around customer microsegments, and they work in small cross-functional teams as opposed to large functional departments. Now, if you are a small business, you're already like a small cross-functional team, right? And so you can really, everyone in your team can know the customer. If you're in a large organization, even organizations that have tens of thousands of employees, they can still make this move to cross-functional teams focused on the customer. It's just a little bit more difficult. And this is where I think, augmenting with things like AI is super important. Okay, so the cross-functional teams that are focused on those microsegments, they're very agile and flexible, and they're agile and flexible enough to solve those customers' issues really quickly. And it's true even if you're changing those products, services, and business models. So to accomplish the first 2 points, the digital talent and the digital operations, digital businesses have to adopt exponential technologies on a regular basis, and they can implement those technologies in days and weeks. So that actually contrasts, right, with the traditional businesses and traditional technologies, which take quarters and years to implement. Okay, so we have made it through the conceptual part of the organization, and we're going to start moving into a tool that you can use to help you make the transformation from traditional business to digital business. But first, I have a question for you guys. And now this time you can just think about this question. You don't have to type your answer in comments. But are you working too hard to keep up with the pace of business today? Do you get like caught up in the day-to-day tasks of running your business? I see Scott's like, yes. Oh my God, yes. Do you spend so much time working in your business that you don't have time to work on your business? Right? Yes. People are like, yes, I do. I do. Alfred's yes. Well, with the magnitude of change that's required to move from traditional business to digital business, I mean, when you think about it, we're moving from the industrial age to the next stage, which is that's like an amazing time to be alive, in my opinion. You have to spend the majority of your time working on your business. So to clarify what I mean by all this, I'm going to share a tool with you that we use at Focal Point that's called the 3 I's of the business owner. This was adapted from the book The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And think about these 3 I's as the roles we all play as business leaders or owners if you own your own company. All right, let's walk through the tool. The first I of the business owner is a forward-looking I. This is the I of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the visionary, the dreamer. Where do you guys think that the focus of the entrepreneur is? Is it in the past, the present, or the future? What do you think? Past, present, or future? Remember, it's a forward-looking I. Yeah, exactly, the future. Absolutely. This role lives in the future, asking questions like, what if? And if, then when? This is where strategy is born. What do we need to do this quarter, this year, 3 years out? This is a creative personality or a role at its best when dealing with the unknown. There's a hunger for change, which can actually create a great deal of havoc, right? There's also a strong need for control of the present to make room for the future. Okay, so now as business leaders, what are some of the things that you should be doing in the role of the entrepreneur? I'm going to see what you guys think. What are some of the things that you should be doing? You're thinking about their future, looking at trends, strategic planning. Absolutely. Strategic planning is super important. And, my favorite tool for strategic planning is the Align tool. It's really amazing. Market facing activities. Vikram, thank you for that. Absolutely. In the Align tool, there's actually a one-page strategic plan. It walks you through questions to fill out. It gives you information on what each piece means. And then it creates a beautiful 1 to 2 page plan for your strategy. So absolutely, strategy is a key piece, market-facing activities, figuring out the change, really looking at how do you need to reinvent your business. And being close, Alfred, that's a great point. Being close to the team to take them along. So you're going to, as an entrepreneur, you're going to create a strategy and a vision, and that vision has to be compelling and motivate people. Absolutely. Great point. Okay, the second I of the business owner is the manager. So where do you think the focus of the manager is? It's actually the present. Yeah, it seems like the present operations today is actually a bit of a backward looking eye. The manager actually lives a bit in the past. And here's why. They're analyzing last month's numbers. They're looking for trends in last month's number. The manager is very pragmatic and they crave order. Where the entrepreneur thrives on change, the manager, right, is the team's vision and the manager's pragmatism from which all great works are born. So what are some of the things that you should be doing when you're playing the role of the manager? What are some things that you do as a manager? Check the numbers. Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. Looking at the KPIs. Absolutely. Metrics. That's exactly some of the things that you need to be doing as the manager. Okay, so the third I is the I of the technician. So where do you think the technician lives? Entrepreneur was the future, manager was the past. What's left? The present, of course, in the moment. I love that, Scott, because the technician absolutely lives in the moment. They're doing things like the phone's ringing, right? I have to answer it. It's broke. I have to fix it. The technician is often so caught up in the day-to-day of running the business or their department that their eyes look a little bloodshot. To the technician, thinking is unproductive unless it's thinking about the work that needs to be done right now. So the fact is that as business leaders and owners, we play all three of these roles. And here's the funny thing. Since most entrepreneurial ideas don't work in the real world, right? You have to have a lot of ideas and test them out. The technician often gets frustrated with the interruptions on testing these ideas in the course of their day. The manager is determined to impose order on the technician's work. And if you put it another way, to the manager, the technician becomes a problem to be managed. To the technician, the manager becomes a meddler to be avoided. And to both of them, it's the entrepreneur who got them into this trouble in the first place. And guess what? Since we all play all three of these roles, even if we have big teams, we can get frustrated with ourselves. Have you guys ever felt that? Have you ever felt like being frustrated with yourself? Yeah, it's kind of funny. It is kind of funny. Yeah, I can see you guys have, right? All the time. I got so frustrated when I first started my business, when I left the corporate world and I went off on my own because I was playing all these three roles. And when I realized, I was thinking, oh my God, this is exactly what, you know, the book the book was telling me about. The E-Myth Revisited, I just started laughing. I actually literally bust out laughing in my office. I'm like, oh, I'm playing all three roles. I'm frustrated with myself. All right, so let's look at time spent. In a typical business, with a typical business owner, where do you think most business owners spend the majority of their time? Where do we spend the majority of our time as business leaders? The technician role, exactly. And what percent of our time do you think we play in the technician role? All the time. I love it. Yeah, you can definitely get caught. 105% in the technician role. I love it. 70%. All right. So, you know what? I'm going to call it 70%. And that leaves 30%, right, in the manager and the entrepreneur role. So I'm just going to split it between the two, 2010. At most, a lot of us spend 10% of our time in the entrepreneurial role. But how do you think that impacts the business if we're spending all of our time in the technician role? And in particular, in this time in history when business is accelerating, right? And we have to reinvent ourselves. So it can really hurt the business quite a bit. And it can be disastrous, really. And here's why. At Focal Point, we find that 80% of a company's growth comes from the work in the top two roles, maybe 65% from the entrepreneur. And if you think about it, in this fast paced world, you have to be thinking about reinventing your business, right? Alfred says you don't grow, right? And you don't if you're not spending your time. And 15% comes from the manager role. And that leaves about 20% from the technician role. This is where growth comes from. So you can feel like you're kind of in a trap, and we have to exit that trap of spending too much time as a technician and shifting it to 65% of our time needs to be spent in that top role. So I think it's helpful to leverage kind of a mental model. So I'm going to ask you guys, how much does a technician make? If you think about a technician maybe as a customer service role, administrative assistance, doing bookkeeping, how much does a technician make? Now, I know we have people from all over the world. So we're going to call what a technician makes $15 an hour. How much money does a business owner make? Or how much money does a business owner want to make? So how much money do you guys want to make an hour? What would you like to make an hour? Sometimes I ask the question this way. If you want to make $1 million a year, how much is that an hour? Ooh, Scott, $850 an hour. I love it. That's actually more than $1 million a year. So we're going to call it $100+ an hour, just for the sake of this mental model. Okay, so here's the question. If you're stuck doing technician's work, if you're always working in your business, let's say you're doing things like entering numbers into QuickBooks, you're answering phone calls, you're sifting through email, would you pay someone $100 an hour to do that? So as you step through what you're doing on a daily basis, ask your question, would I pay someone $15 an hour, or would I pay someone $100 an hour to do that? Would I pay someone $250 to do that, $850 to do that? Some of those hourly rates that you guys want to make. And when you answer that question of no, I would never pay somebody this much money to do it, then you need to figure out how to get that done another way. Right? You could delegate it, you could automate it. There's many things that you can do in order to stop doing those things that aren't important to shifting and growing your business and start doing the things that are important. Okay, so I'm going to leave you guys with one final thought. If you are working in your business as opposed to working on your business, flip where you're spending your time from where the majority of people spend their time in the technician role to where you need to spend your time to remain relevant and grow your business in this next age that we find ourselves in. All right. So we made it through all the material. Let's open up and see if we have questions. So we got a great question from Scott. How do we budget and model paying for the flip? Okay. So I think, Scott, the first thing that you need to do is think about what are those activities that you're currently doing that need to shift, and what are some of the most cost-effective ways to do it. So, if you're spending time up in the entrepreneurial piece, you're spending time on your strategy. You're probably spending time on looking at how do you generate leads and more customers. And so you've got to generate some dollars, right, in order to pay someone else to do it. Or you can automate things. So let me give you an example. I told you in the beginning of my business I was kind of, right? And one of the things that really frustrated me, especially coming out of corporate America and the roles I played there, I used to have an administrative assistant. And now I had my new business and I was starting out. I didn't have the money to pay for an administrative assistant at the time. And the thing that was driving me the craziest was scheduling meetings, because I started to get busy, which is awesome. And I would send times out for people to meet with me. And I'd end up sending the same times to people, and they'd pick the same times. And it was just taking way too much time. So I found a tool for less than $100 a year that automated my calendar. So think about not only delegating and having to pay someone to do the things you don't want to do, think about how can you automate it. So now when I need to schedule a meeting, I send someone a calendar link that is linked to my calendar and only shows the available times to them. When they pick a time, it automatically sends us both a meeting request. It saved me hours of time. So think about things like that. What other questions do we have?
Kerrie, I was going to ask the question. Obviously, the adage is that change is hard,
Yes.
particularly for business owners who think that they have rather successful businesses. When you were talking about sort of going from traditional business to digital business, the thing that I kept thinking about was like fax machines, and the fact that doctors' offices are still using fax machines and actual physical patient folders. And doctors are very successful in their practices, but how do you convince, as a business coach, how do you convince a business owner to really get into that digital mindset where they really are willing to make the effort and commit to making the change to move their business from its current success to what hopefully will be achieved in a digital business in the future?
Yeah, that's a great point, because change really is hard, right? It's hard, and there's a change curve that we all have to take ourselves through, right? And so the way that I do this with business partners is we talk about, what's not necessarily working in their business. Are they getting enough? In the case of a doctor, can they handle their patient load? Are they getting enough patients? Do they feel like they're able to spend quality time, right, with their patients? And you really kind of dig deep to get them to see that maybe things are a little bit more painful than not. Um, there's three things when you're looking at change and resistance to change. There's actually three things that you need to have on in order to overcome resistance to change. One of them is you have to have a clear vision of the future. The second one is that you need to understand the dissatisfaction that currently exists. So I actually take my business owners through and say, what are you not satisfied with, or what are your employees not satisfied with? Especially if a leader's trying to get their people to change, because people are always dissatisfied with things, and as leaders we often kind of push that away and try to like wipe it away, like I don't want people to be satisfied. But if you actually bring out the dissatisfaction, it is a motivator to get people to change. And then as a leader, you have to provide really simple next steps for people to take. And if those three things, your vision, the dissatisfaction for the current state, and the next steps to change are greater than the resistance, then change will happen.
I see Scott has a question. There are so many vendors when it comes to selecting digital technologies. Do you have any advice on how to develop sort of your own expertise in choosing the correct digital tool that you're going to go into, one that's going to be most cost efficient, most user friendly, and easy to implement in your particular organization?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at software, you really there's a number of things you can do. Um, Asking other people and asking other successful entrepreneurs the software that they're using, sometimes that's the best way, because these really modernly architected technologies become viral. And they become viral because they're so easy to use. So I think Zoom is a great example, right? Zoom is really not that old, but Zoom, everybody knows what Zoom is. And now people say, oh, let's do a Zoom, or can you Zoom with me? It's becoming a word, just like Google, just Google it, right? When these technologies are easy, they become viral. They're very easy to implement. So you should, if you're looking at a technology and what is it going to take to implement it, you should be able to implement it in days, really in days or weeks, depending on how big your organization is. And the third thing is that it's really easy to use. So the training on how to use it, you should be able to find 1 to 2 to 5 minute videos on YouTube on how to use the software. You should be able to go to the software company's website and see a help area that has a training that's self-paced training, because it's so easy to use. I think the Align tool is a good example too, because if you get a demo of the Align tool, the training for like how to fill out a strategic plan, it's right there. There's the little question mark, I think it is, in the corner, and if you click on that, it tells you exactly how to fill out that piece. So it's training you as you're using it. Okay, so that's another example of how to figure out if the software is a good software.
Alfred asked the question. Thank you, Kerrie. Is there a difference when you're evaluating an internal digital model versus an external digital model? Sort of how are there differences that you should be considering when you're thinking about taking your business internally to a next level digitally versus how you service your clients, sell your goods, or provide your services to outside your business or
I
outside
love
your internal team?
Yeah, I love this question, and I love this question for a couple of reasons. One of the differences between digital business and traditional business is that digital businesses are very customer in. They're organized from the customer in as opposed to the inside out. So what I mean by that, in a traditional company, you get an order, but then it goes through all these pieces internally, all these processes, all these departments, and then you kick out a product on the other side, right? In a digital business, it's customer in, and the customer starts to impact what's happening. Both being able to have a digital model, both internally on how you run your business and also externally how you reach out to the customer, is very important. In a digital model, when you get more and more digital, those start to blur. They start to become the same thing. But you can't just work on the customer centricity piece without working on digitizing your internal aspects. Because in order to practice extreme customer centricity, you have to be agile and flexible internally. You have to be able to get things done really quickly. And it really is true to the point where you can create products and services very quickly that match your customers' issues, even if your customers' issues aren't on your core business. So let me give you an example from a big company, if you don't mind. Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina is a great example. They sell insurance, right? But they rethought their company and they said, really, we are selling health. We're selling insurance, but the healthier our customer base is, the more profitable we are as a company. And it's to our core value, right, of keeping people healthy. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina has a very rural population, and they actually started creating things like health clinics and farmers markets and things that were driving the health of their customer base and really the health of the community. And so that's really they're solving their customers' issue of being unhealthy and making them more healthy. It was a whole different product and service. Like, who would think that Blue Cross Blue Shield would be into that? But they are, and they're very, very digital as a large company. They're making the shift.
All right, we still have a few minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat. I see Henry has joined us, and Henry, I don't know if you have some other questions that have been posed by the group, so feel free to jump in.
Sure, Kerrie, I'm hoping you could talk about with the transition to a lot of us working on virtual teams, how that kind of affects your framework and some of the tools that you've seen companies roll out effectively to kind of mitigate the communication issues that can happen and kind of hold back some of the the progress that you're talking about with this digital transformation.
Yeah, I think that working virtually, right, is so important. It's something that I've actually been doing for decades because I manage teams who are global around the world and some of my corporate roles. But I think it's really important to keep a human connection. And so when you're working remotely and you're using a tool that, there's many tools out there, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, whatever you're using, it is important to have that video on so that you can see people, right? But at the same time, if you're on video 8 hours a day, it's very fatiguing at the same time. So, really get a feel for that with your teams and the people that you're working with. Maybe have video on in the beginning to say hi. Absolutely have video on when you're introducing new people. But then get a pulse for, are people kind of video fatigued or are they not? There's all kinds of ways too to reach out to people, right? So we can reach out through chat. We can reach out through the video conferences, we can reach out through email, kind of get a feel for how people like to communicate as well. And I think the other thing is being really sensitive to the working times. If people are, with companies with people still 100% remote, if you have small kids and kids in grade school who are also still doing virtual school, they can't do it on their own, right? They need help. So you have to be flexible with people in terms of working hours. So I know couples who are both working with young kids where they take turns on who's working more evenings, who's working during the day. You got to be a little bit more flexible as well with that. Does that make sense?
For sure. And I think this kind of transitions into a question that Scott asks about, we went from an office where you had cubes and a manager can kind of walk around and track how people were performing and whether they were staying focused. How can managers kind of put those digital eyeballs on their employees and track how they're performing without kind of creeping them out or, kind of micromanaging?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've actually seen some tools that are like a window, right? So you that are always on and you can just see who's around, which, it depends on your culture if that's going to work. One of the things that I works really well about, just making sure you're keeping up with employees is to do a daily stand-up meeting. Right. This is actually part of an agile framework of way of working. It's really how digital companies work, but do a daily huddle is what it's called in the Align software, where people are getting together 10, 15 minutes. Actually, try standing up because there's a magical thing about doing a stand-up meeting. It's called that for a reason. When you're standing, you don't talk as long as you do when you're sitting. So really, actually stand up and do a daily huddle. And the daily huddle is basically, what's everybody working on today? What help do you need? And just keep tabs. And it's not really keeping tabs on, don't think of it as I have to keep tabs on and make sure my employees are working. Believe me, people are working harder than they ever worked. Most people are. It's more about what are they working on today? What obstacles do they have holding back? And how, as managers, can we help them? How can we enable them to get their work done? And when people see it in that light, they're gonna they'll actually like the daily huddles and the daily stand-up meetings. Yeah, Alfred says it's just a daily connect. Yeah, exactly. It is just a daily connect, and that's what you can call it. It's a very powerful tool. There's also some basic things that are from the industrial age that we should be doing that we often don't do. Like if you're going to have a meeting, have an agenda. In that agenda, make sure you're talking about what's going to be discussed and what are the outcomes you want to achieve. Keep track of action items. Make sure that you're going back and looking at those action items. There's great ways to track all this. In the Align tool with priorities and tasks. And you guys make it really easy actually to do weekly huddles and daily huddles. It's awesome. One of my businesses is myself, and another business there's more people in it. I even in my business, in my focal point business where it's me, I'm the only employee, I do a daily huddle with myself. And I do a weekly huddle with myself. And I do that to make sure that I'm spending time in that entrepreneurial role and manager role and not always in the technician role.
I guess just as one final question, and this is an opportunity for you to kind of talk about some of your writing, but could you give a couple books or learning resources for leaders who want to go out and dive into this and learn more about the transformations you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did write a chapter in a book called Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner. So you guys see that on the bottom left. There's a book called Disrupt or Die that's really good. The book by Thomas Friedman, Thank You for Being Late, is also an awesome book that talks about this move from the industrial age to the next stage. I want to point something out in the book. In the book, Thank You for Being Late. Now, the title of the book, Thank You for Being Late, he actually titled that because he was doing research for a book and he was meeting with people in person and they would be late. People would be late. And so in the time where they would be late, he would get into his entrepreneurial role and really think about what needed to happen and what was happening in the world. That's why it's called Thank You for Being Late. The other cool thing about this book is he talks about these exponential technologies. And there's a chapter called What the Hell Happened? Sorry for my English, but that's the name of the chapter. What the Hell Happened in 2007? And it's my favorite thing because it talks about all these technologies that really started to explode at that time. I'm trying to think of an older book that actually, it's like the Exponential Organization, I think is the name of it. That was a very early book in terms of recognizing this move to a digital way of doing business. So the Exponential Organization is really cool too.
All right. Thank you, Kerrie. We are almost at the top of the hour. So unless there are any other questions, pop them into the chat. I'll give everybody just one last minute. If there is a final question that anybody needs to put out there, please do so now. Not seeing any final questions, I want to thank everyone, including our coach presenter today, for a great presentation. As Kerrie has put on her last slide, there's contact information for Kerrie. You can reach her at hoffmandigital.com, or you can find her on LinkedIn. If any of you have questions about how to use the Align software, as Kerrie mentioned during her presentation, obviously, please don't hesitate to contact us, your advisor, at support@aligntoday.com. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We hope that you will join us again next month for our next coach webinar. Till then, we hope that you have a great day, a great week, and thank you so much, everybody. Please be safe.